Now, the wrathful activities has to be practiced with compassion. If you can practice in such a way, then the obstacles that's created for you, or the obstacles to the propagation of Dharma, can be wrathfully subjected.
就以前古代是比较多的，就是咒助，可能好像那个汉地也有吧，就是以前那个什么这个皇宫里面的话，那就是有时候也是他们就是做一些像那个。
Well, Omahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava Omahom
电视里面就是然后。
averts the dagger sorcery of Buddhists and Bopans. The Boon tradition, especially when the daggers of the Boon tradition sometimes are used as a sorcery or as a ritual for curses. I think in the mainland tradition, sometimes we see that in a movie there are people who would perform those curse rituals. They would use some needles to pierce the little mannequins that they made that resembles the person that they want to curse, almost like a voodoo doll. In some very ancient religions, those rituals for curses are quite common. In terms of Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there are all kinds of rituals that averts those rituals or those curses. Especially the most commonly used one is through the practice of the Heart Sutra. But I didn't see this in the mainland tradition. Rather, I saw that only in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And sometimes they would use that kind of practice or liturgy of Heart Sutra as a ritual or as a liturgy to avert or even bounce back the mantras or the curses. And then Vajra averts the harmful powers of the wisdom deities. Guru averts the harmful powers of the 8 classes of gods and demons, of the Nagas, of the 8 classes of Nagas, that is. Sometimes the 8 classes of Nagas are the protectors, but sometimes if they're irritated, they could also create obstacles. With the Padma, it averts the powerful harmful powers of worldly gods and spirits. Siddhi averts the harmful powers of Nagas and gods of localities. And Hom averts the harmful powers of all the 3, the gods, demons, and human beings. There are all various kinds of ways of curses and placing negative power on harmful power onto others. Well, there are different ways of doing so, but we don't really like to speak of it because the kind of practitioners that are very good at practicing, they won't do it, and the people who are not good at practicing the Dharma, they want to do it, and that would create harm for themselves as well as others. In the past, there are different kinds of shamans that would perform rituals and chant different liturgies and so on. But as Buddhists, especially Buddhists of Mahayana, we would not use different curses to place harmful power over them. And sometimes whenever we encounter certain rishis and rishis of the non-Buddhist schools, we do not need to be afraid of them. Because the more we are afraid of those kinds of harmful powers, we are more attracted to those harmful powers. Though sometimes the people are not cursing you or placing any harmful powers over you, but there are people that hallucinates over how others would do it. Majority of the stories or things that I've heard from the lay practitioners practitioners are like so. They're just deluded thoughts, really. People nowadays not necessarily have that kind of power, because nowadays people don't have the kinds of powers like the rishis in ancient India. Also, it doesn't work in such a way that immediately you would receive the curses or the negative powers. There are people who would hallucinate that, oh, so-and-so rolled his eyes at me. He must be doing some kind of cursing rituals to me. That is why I'm not feeling well today. In fact, the majority of it is really just hallucination and dualistic thoughts. Sometimes we would feel that so-and-so are not good to you, or they're not being nice to you, and as a Mahayana practitioner, we don't have to care about that. We don't have to be afraid. We can chant the Vajra Guru Mantra. Even if they were to successfully place the harmful powers over us, we should contemplate in such a way that we must have done harm to this person in the past, and we must have created this negative karma, this debt to them. That is why we are now clearing it out, or we're repaying it back. Majority of people nowadays, they don't seem to be the kind of people who study the Mahayana Dharma, and sometimes they're not the kind of people who studied the Gyuhar Sutra, the Mahajala Tantra. People nowadays seems to be very afraid of negative powers or obstacles. They would then go to different kinds of readers to get predictions read, and they would be afraid of demons or harmful powers placed on them, and then they would have hallucinations over it. If you're people like that, then I think you should practice more of the Padmasambhava mantra. I once heard of the story, some Dharma teacher from the Padmasambhava study center from Taiwan. He said that there was once a farmer who lived in Bhutan. Because of the curses placed by his enemy, he got blind, completely blind. And because he's blind, he can't really work. So he kept on chanting the Vajra Guru Mantra. And because of that, at the time when he finished chanting 300 million times of that mantra, he saw Padmasambhava and then received a series of predictions from him. And then when he finished 600 million times of that mantra, he received all kinds of blessings and exhibited all kinds of signs of having those blessings. In 2006, this person passed away. And when he passed away, the whole country was amazed by the signs of achievement. And people generate great faith because of that. If our mind could relax as a practitioner, then nothing is a problem. The majority of things that turns into an obstacle is because our mind, our heart grasp onto it. Our mind fears of obstacles. If we're not, then they're not going to create harm to us. If you were to abide in a state of harm, of fear, then harm would be bestowed on you. So if you can chant more of those Vajra Guru Mantra, you have nothing to be afraid of. You don't need to worry too much. Just chant Om Ahom Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hom, and then the 5 poisons. Om Ahom crushes the forces of the 5 poisons. The previous part talks about the inner poisons, and then here it talks about the 5 poisons, the forces of 5 poisons that would create all kinds of enemies of Maras. For example, some of the forces of Maras are created by hatred and aversion, some by pride, and so on and so forth. There are different kinds of forces of Maras. If you, at times of chanting Om Ahom, it crushes the forces of the 5 poisons. And the way we should see it is that all the external Maras are the Maras that's projected by our own inner poisons. Now, Vajra crushes the forces of hatred and aversion. There are all kinds of conflicts nowadays, conflicts among countries or among people or even among Sangha, the Sangha members. And then because of those hatred and aversion, it calls for the forces of Mara. With Guru, it crushes the force of pride, and Pema crushes the forces of craving and attachment. Siddhi crushes the force of jealousy. Hum crushes the force of gods, demons, and humans.